The Siberian winter of 1972 didn't just bite, it devoured. It was the kind of cold the KGB found useful, a natural accomplice to their grim work. Their target was Father Mikhail, a young, fervent Baptist preacher whose growing influence in a small Ukrainian village had become an ideological infection in the eyes of the state. His crime was faith, his sermon, resistance. Interrogation, beatings, and starvation had failed to break his spirit. So, the officers devised a more final, more psychologically elegant solution. They wouldn't grant him the dignity of a martyr's bullet. Instead, they would let the earth and the cold do their work, wrapped in a narrative of his own insanity. One iron gray dawn, they dragged a weakened, barely conscious Father Mikhail to a remote, snow-swept field. Before him lay a crude, makeshift coffin, a welded metal box, more like a tool crate, designed for a solitary occupant. With cruel, mocking solemnity, they sentenced him for his crimes against the atheist state. They forced him inside, nailed the lid shut with heavy industrial nails, and lowered the box into a freshly dug, shallow grave. Dirt, then packed snow, muffled the world. To the two officers assigned to guard the site, it was a simple vigil over a corpse that just hadn't stopped breathing yet. They retreated to a nearby shack, a bottle of vodka between them, to wait out the 24 hours they were ordered to stand watch. The first hour passed in silence. The second, too. The officers toasted to the efficiency of their methods. No mess, no evidence, just a madman who vanished. Then, as the third hour bled into the fourth, a sound cut through the howling wind. A distant, rhythmic thud. It was metallic, hollow, persistent. Boom, boom, boom. The older officer, Vasily, paused his glass mid-air. "Wolves," he grunted, though his eyes narrowed. "Wolves don't knock on tin," muttered the younger one, Sasha. They tried to ignore it, turning up their radio. But the sound continued, a stubborn, unhurried heartbeat from the grave. Boom, boom, boom. It was not the frantic clawing of a panicked animal. It was deliberate, almost liturgical. An insistent, defiant pulse. Driven by a superstitious dread he'd never admit, Vasily grabbed a shovel. "We bury it deeper. Silence it." They trudged back to the grave. The sound was clearer now, unmistakably coming from inside the metal box. It seemed louder, stronger. With each strike, the packed snow over the coffin vibrated. They began shoveling more earth onto it, their movements hurried, angry. But the knocking didn't cease. If anything, it grew more resonant, as if the act of burial only amplified the sermon. For hours, it continued. Through the long, polar afternoon and into the deeper cold of the night, the knocking was a constant, maddening counterpoint to their fear. They used more earth, then piled heavy stones on top. Still, the sound echoed. It got into their heads, under their skin. It spoke of a life they were ordered to extinguish but which refused to be extinguished. It was an accusation, a testament, a rebellion all in one simple, repetitive act. Sasha, his nerves frayed, yelled at the ground. "Die, you fanatic! Just die!" The knocking answered, steady as a metronome. By the next morning, the officers were hollow-eyed, defeated not by a man, but by a sound. The 24-hour order was up. With a mixture of relief and profound terror, they reported their duty complete. A bulldozer was summoned to cover the site completely, to entomb the sound under tons of frozen soil. The operator, a grizzled local named Yuri, fired up his machine. As he began pushing a wave of earth into the grave, he too heard it, a final, defiant series of knocks. Boom. 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 Then, as the last light was blotted out by dirt, silence finally fell. The state had won. Father Mikhail was gone. But the story refused to be buried. It leaked out through Yuri, through the haunted whispers of Sasha, who would never be the same. It spread through the underground networks of the faithful. The KGB thought they had killed him, but for those who heard the tale, Father Mikhail was not killed in that grave. In his final hours, sealed in darkness, he had preached the most powerful sermon of his life. Not with words, but with a knock. A knock that testified, to the very men sent to kill him, that the spirit they tried to crush was unbreakable. It was a sound that said, "I am here. My faith is here. And you cannot silence it." It became known as the Coffin Sermon, a legend of resilience that fueled the clandestine church for decades. It wasn't a story of supernatural escape, but of a spiritual victory so profound it unnerved the machinery of hell itself. The grave became a symbol. For the KGB, it was a pit where they buried a problem. For the faithful, it was the birthplace of an echo that outlasted an empire.